poetry as a conversation. It's a vital form of communication.
Poetry was my best friend growing up. You know, it was always there.
That is the power of poetry. I love it.
Welcome back to ArtSpark. Did you miss us? Because we missed you. If this is your first time in our digital studio, my name is Yetunde Felix-Ukwu. Today's episode is going to be so much fun because we have two special guests today. We'll learn more about their story, what inspires them. They'll share some work with us, and then we'll dive into my favorite part, the art prompt. This is where our artist friends will share a cool and unique way for you to participate at home. It's going to be so much fun. Let's dive in.
Sail of surrender, cold geometry, slow ice treading on blue skin, slow dread, treading. Beauty as a form of isolation, bled and tethered, an accidental hook rusted in. She dreams of green meat and eelgrass, a blizzard of fireflies, but survives on air and decay. Winded instrument that sings about drowning under a pale awning. Her cry stripped of its cord, a wounded call that will not carry.
Hadara Bar-Nadav is a teacher and award-winning poet who is also trained as a musician and visual artist. In her poetry, she focuses on the healing power of language, responding to the world around her. Early in her career, she started as a spoken word poet performing at slam venues in New York. As her career evolved, Hadara has transitioned to a poet of the page and now has 7 published works to her name. Her latest book of poetry is The New Nudity, a radiant new collection of poetry which shocks everyday objects to life. In these chiseled, electrically charged poems, a ladder, wine glass, and spine ignite into being. She is also the author of Lullaby with Exit Sign, The Frame Called Ruin, and A Glass of Milk to Kiss Goodnight. Recent awards include a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship in Poetry and the Lucille Medwick Award from the Poetry Society of America. As a multi-hyphenate artist, Hadara uses her love of poetry to explore other art forms and believes in the power of creativity and its unyielding, beautiful force in the world.
Welcome, Hadara Bar-Nadav. We are so happy to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Welcome.
Don't call me immigrant. I'm the new American, dreaming of new America. As a new American, I am not your invader, not an animal nor criminal. I am a just person, just dreaming of a new America. Old America, don't be afraid. We are all America, North America, Central America, South America. We are all Americans. We all strive in Americas. We all survive in Americas. We all live in Americas. They are all the same America. We all dream of a greater America. I want you to be paid a living wage, live in affordable housing without college debt or medical debt or credit card debt or national debt. I want no more racism. I'm speaking of a new America. I am part of new America, whether you like it or not. So join me, please.
Huascar Medina is the current Poet Laureate of Kansas. Through his poetry, he looks to enrich, support, unify, and expand the poetic landscape of Kansas and the Midwest. Huascar believes poetry is the language of emotion. Through the use of poetry, he is able to communicate before he is understood, and in this way is able to share his truth. He's published 2 collections of poetry, Un Mango Grows in Kansas and How to Hang the Moon. His words have appeared in the New York Times, Latino Book Review, and elsewhere. Not only is he a poet, but he works to increase the visibility of Kansas poetry through online and print reviews, collaborative readings, and radio interviews. He is the lit editor for 785 magazine, the creator and host of Kansas is Lit on 785live.com, an op-ed writer for Kansas Reflector, and a new editor at South Broadway Press. Huascar sees poetry as a lens he uses both telescopically and microscopically in order to explore, observe, and admire the world.
Welcome, Huascar Medina. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to have a conversation with you and to finally get to meet you. I mean, it's virtually, but I'm glad I'm here.
Nice to meet you. Well, I want to just dive right in. I want to know when you first knew that you were a poet, and then how did you know?
Poetry has always been the way that I've dealt with my emotions and feelings. I'm very introverted. Knowing that I was a poet is, I don't know, when you're an artist, you spend years searching for validation. So I don't know if I ever really knew I was a poet. I just knew that I loved poetry and that I wanted poetry to be part of my life and my day-to-day life. And, in the lunchrooms in high school, reading anthologies or, selected works of other poets was, those were like my friends, because I really struggled sometimes with having conversations with people and reaching out, because I moved a lot growing up. So poetry was my best friend growing up. It was always there. It was my sidekick. So I think I'm a poet because that's what I'm comfortable being around, and that type of energy works for me.
Wow. Okay. I think I knew I was a poet a few times over in my life. As a very young person, when I was around 6 years old, I started writing poetry and keeping a journal. And I've talked to my mother about this. Neither of us remembers me being assigned to do this, as, a teacher said, do this, or I just somehow came to it. And so writing to me has always felt like second nature. It's something I go to, it's part of my life, and it's always been there. But I guess I knew I was a writer and I knew I was a poet, but that didn't mean I knew I would do it as a career in any way. And I think I probably decided again when I was in college that I was a poet, and I started to slam at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe, and I identified as a poet. And then again, once I was in graduate school, I thought I am going to be this person who is a poet. And if people ask me what I do for a living, and I love messing with folks like this, I tell them I'm a poet. And they're always so confused. They have no idea if I'm joking or
are they like, so what do you really do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm like, I am a poet. It's actually what I do for a living. It's how I survive in the world.
I love it.
People they just want me to say accountant. They just want me to say I'm a baker. They want the easy answer so they can categorize me and move on. But when someone asks what I do for a living and I say poet, they're just completely perplexed.
You said that you've become a poet of the page. What is it now that inspires you to put pen to the page and start writing? What inspires you to write?
So I think about poetry as a conversation. It's a vital form of communication. And for me, typically I write in response to other poetry. So I sit down to write. I will pull a bunch of books of poetry around me, maybe a couple of art books, and I just read and look and take in. And at some point, my hope, it doesn't always happen, is that something catches, a series of words, an image that will just set me off and I'll just start going. But occasionally it's an inspiration that comes from some other world. When I'm lying in bed trying to fall asleep and all of a sudden a poem starts to come to me, or I have a difficult exchange with my mother, or watch something on the news that sort of cracks my mind in half and makes me have to respond. But I would say probably 85% of my poems, 90% of my poems are in conversation with the work of other artists.
Thank you.
So what is it that inspires you to put pen to paper?
Feeling, recording moments, trying to put them in a place that I can reach out to and investigate later and not forget. I think sometimes poetry can be the act of memory, and placing it there and holding it on, holding it in the stationary sense, stationary paper, and it's there and you can return to it. And I do that a lot. You have conversations with people and you're like, you go back to it later. It's like, did I say what I was supposed to say? Could I have had that conversation differently? I do that with my feelings and my emotions. Was I feeling the way I should have felt about that moment? Was that experience something that I want to remember and hold on to? Should I cherish it more than I did before? And that what poetry does, it gives me that place to self-evaluate, everything.
I love that. And so are you saying that poetry helps you capture a moment in time?
It is. It's capturing time, but it's capturing time in a very specific way. It's capturing an emotion that occurred in that moment. So it's about capturing emotions, like putting it in a bottle, and then you can put the time it occurred on that bottle, but it's about the feeling. It's about trying to capture that feeling and be able to pull it out the jar and, spread it later, and eat it.
Help me understand the feeling of when a poem is ready, right? Either it's ready to be performed or it's ready to be published. How do you know when it's done?
That's a difficult one for me because a lot of my work doesn't come out for a long time. The conversations I have on the page are conversations I'm having, with myself. And sometimes you walk away from the conversation not feeling like the conversation is done. And that's the sense I get when I'm writing a poem. I'm having a conversation. There's me, the poet, the writer of the work. There's also the intent that I put onto the page, and then that intent becomes the voice of the poem. So now I'm having this dialogue, this inner dialogue in a sense, with the page. And when I know I'm complete with that is if a third party were to eavesdrop into our conversation, would they be able to understand what we're talking about? That's when I know the poem is done.
Oh, I never thought about it that way.
The feeling is exciting because I do think of poetry as a vital form of communication, and in a very strange way, stay with me for a minute now, I almost sort of feel like the poem isn't mine. So part of me feels like I channel work that comes to me, and then I give it out to the world because it's not mine. It doesn't, if it's only communicating to me, it's not, and there's work that I write for myself. I still keep a journal, there's work, but when I make a piece of art, I want the community part of it. I want people to be part of it. I want it to be part of the world. Poetry, I think, especially in these pandemic times, it helps people know they're not alone. There is a person speaking to you. And my hope is that there's a person listening and then speaking back to me, and I can listen.
So everybody recently got excited about Amanda Gorman and her poem at the inauguration. I would love to ask what you think the outlook of the industry of the art form is. Are people still writing? Are people excited? What's your outlook on the industry and its cultural impact that poetry is having?
Yeah, I'm so excited about Amanda Gorman, and I also love that such a young person was given this seat of honor. And I think in our political landscape, it's important that we listen to young people in the most cheesy sense. They are the future, and they see possibility where I think, some people who are older, maybe especially in Washington, are entrenched in single ways of seeing the world. And so, part of why I love teaching is because I get to be around young people who see possibility and see it as a fact. Possibility is a fact. I can do anything. I can have any career. Anyway, I love that Amanda Gorman was not only at Biden's inauguration, but read again at the Super Bowl.
At the Super Bowl.
Like, oh my God. It's a collision of cultures, football and poetry.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's incredible. I hope that it means my classes are even more full. So I'm very excited to see how poetry is entering into mainstream culture, and that people see how important language is in framing a moment and doing it with an expansiveness and an attentiveness and an accuracy, that you can frame a historical moment in language. And who gets to frame that historical moment in language? Very important. And I will say this, I personally think the pandemic itself has changed the cultural impact of poetry. I think people, because of the pandemic, are dying for connection.
Yes.
They want people, humanity, a place to feel, a place to think and be and express and join with other people.
There's this building interest in poetry right now. I think what has occurred with the current state of our country, I think just the pandemic is influencing the way that we absorb art. Poetry online right now has been accessible to more people than ever before, and the platform has changed. Like, it's allowing us to have conversations like we're having today, about poetry. So poetry right now is just, there's this plethora of talent out there, and excited individuals who want to participate in poetry, who want to hear poetry, who can find it now in ways they couldn't find it before. And it's all around you. There's an open mic almost every night of the week right now. If there's entire networks dedicated to just sharing those open mics, and now those open mics are happening virtually. So I can attend a virtual open mic that's happening in Colorado now. I don't have to be physically present now. So, the roads, the distances, they've disappeared now if you can accept the poetry setting as being one that's virtual. So I'm very excited about that, because now we get to network. You get to meet poets from other states, other cities, other towns, just completely different countries sometimes. Some of the readings I attend, there's individuals living in other countries that are tuning in at 4 a.m, to participate in a poetry reading at 9 p.m. It's just that availability that we now have, that poetry's this virtual experience that all of us are sharing, and that we by default have to accept it as a virtual experience. It's a really good thing. It's very positive, but I miss open mics. Let's be very clear. I want to get back to that, but everyone has access to poetry in a way they didn't before, and that makes me very happy.
I have a question. You mentioned the word slam as a verb. What is the act of slamming?
So I feel like I started out as a spoken word poet. So I would go to poetry slams. I have such immense affection for the Nuyorican, where I feel like I cut my poetry teeth when I was 18, 19, 20. I would work till 11 o'clock at night, drive into New York, have too much to drink, be at this bar where everyone basically memorized their poems and would perform them in a very, energized, dramatic, life-affirming kind of way. And there was a remarkable electricity about it. And I was in love with it. I was also, I'm trained as a musician as well. I was listening to a ton of rap, a ton of jazz, and the idea of improvisation was really exciting to me. And also, sort of marrying these, or merging the sonic, so sound and language together. And slam poetry for me was a really exciting way to do that. I loved the performance of it, both giving it and receiving it. There's a charge to that mode of poetry that I've always loved.
Okay, so you are a poet laureate. You are the poet laureate of Kansas. I would love to ask how you get that honor and what is a poet laureate?
It's a position you apply for, which I'm super excited to have been granted. The laureateship in Kansas is a position where you get to travel the state and share poetry with individuals just across all over Kansas. I mean, I travel hours away to the very borders of our state to have conversations with individuals about the importance of poetry and how it can improve or improve is, I'm not saying anyone's not living a good life, but it adds value to your day-to-day lives. And so I go around and share my poetry and my particular story of being, Latino in Kansas. And I'm trying to figure out what my identity and location are. Like, are they the same thing? Is there a difference in between the two? So I've been traveling the state of Kansas, letting people know that individuals that look just like me, talk like me, live in the state, and we also love Kansas, and the poetry that we make also has value and can add value to your life. I think sometimes the poetry in Kansas gets labeled as a bit pastoral, or everyone thinks about the poetry in Kansas of just being about the country, the Flint Hills, and it has its place, but there's so many diverse voices in Kansas, and there's this mosaic of artistry occurring in our state, and I'm just glad that I can be a part of that and speak for poets directly and search for poets in other places, because it's difficult when you're the only poet in your town or city that really wants to take poetry further. So when I enter a community, I'm looking for those young poets, those poets who are next, or those poets who should be now, and trying to share space with them and offer them a bridge to communication and a place to connect with, and to create family and community and a safe space for them to share their work.
Wow. Well, congratulations on your laureateship. It is a well-deserved honor.
Thank you. I'm super excited. I loved it all from beginning to whenever the end should be. So.
All right. My favorite part of the show, it's time for our art prompt. So ArtSpark is designed to let everyone know that art lives inside of them. There's people watching now who say, I write every now and then. I don't really consider myself a poet. What is an artistic prompt that you would give for our audience to watch this episode and then create their own art after watching this?
I would definitely go with noticing colors. I think poetry is a lens that we can put to the world to see things more vibrantly. So an art prompt or an ArtSpark prompt or poetry prompt that I would use is title the page "Colors of My Life," and then describe those colors with things that matter to you. Like, I would start one with brown is the color of my son's eyes. Red is the color of the flowers on my girlfriend's desk at work. Blue is the color of the water by the beach from where my father lives. So just put, brown is, blue is, black is, yellow is, green is, yellow is. Just go through the colors and find out what is the most important thing in that color for you. And let that be the poem.
Hold on, let me go get some paper and pen, because yes, that poem is getting written today. That's so powerful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have an exercise that I created that goes along with my previous book of poetry, The New Nudity, which explores objects, body parts, and some animals as well. So, and this prompt will be available on your website, I understand.
Yes.
It riffs off of a very famous poem that one could Google by Wallace Stevens called 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. And this prompt is called 13 Ways of Looking at a Something. So it asks, participants to choose a favorite object or an object that is meaningful for you, something that has resonance. It could be a ring, a necklace, shoes, keys. It could even be a house. And to start gathering as many specifics and concrete details as they can. And then they can also consider different ways to kind of approach and enter engagement with the object. So exploring the object in terms of imagery, smell, taste, touch, sight, sound, and movement, what it would be like to be inside the object or outside of the object. If the object were male, female, a child, a parent. What happens when the writer explores point of view? So writing as if I were the necklace, so I were the star, versus talking to the star in second person, you the star. And then allowing a narrative to develop if one develops, or if a sound or image sequence develops to develop. And then moving on to arrangement and revision, where the writer picks and choose which, it could be 5, it could be 10 of the original 13 ways plus whatever was added, which of those is really most effective. And even considering what makes a line of poetry or a phrase or a sentence most effective. The writer can then rearrange the phrases. So the last one should totally go first, and the second one maybe should go third, and starting to revise, but to do so with a sense of play and exploration. And nothing's really at stake. It's just, it's making art. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Maybe one phrase will start its own poem entirely, or maybe 3 of the phrases. So I do think art breeds art, and just getting pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, and not just staring at the blank page is important in terms of just starting.
Yay, I love that. And I love how you refer to them as the writer. You hear that? You're a writer.
Yes,
you put the pen to the paper
100%.
and you're a writer. Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, Hadara.
Thank you. Really glad to be here again.
That is the power of poetry. I love it. I love it. Thank you, Huascar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yetunde. Thank you so much for having me on the show today. I really appreciate it.
So I thought I'd open up with a poem inspired by a painting by Rene Magritte, The Lovers. This poem is called Still Life with Death. We were burned and we were blind. We wanted to record the occasion of us, so stole sheets from a sagging clothesline and wrapped them around our heads. This is decoration. Inhaling damp heat through the rose-colored gauze of our bandaged faces. Every shadow loved me, every eyeless girl made of cunning and wind. We owned nothing but ourselves, and we were only an idea. In a church parking lot, I found a man's tweed suit and a box of pastels the color of a bakery, and drew you shoulders, a dress, and pink shoes. Our heads full of flies and violins, we tucked and smoothed our new skins and sat for our portrait on a Sunday afternoon. We scared away the half-drunk picnickers and raised their cheese sandwiches in the air. The hours stood still. Even the worms held their breath.
This poem is entitled Convergence in 3 parts. 1, it is okay to gaze into night. The moon still mediates in the language of our stars. Our eyes speaking in whispers, each blink echoing skyward past the darkness. 2, in this moment, the universe converses. I wish for light, the light of justice, the light of healing, the light of peace, the light of love, the light of life for you. I invite all that shines, that light around you, that light surrounds you, that light is in you, the light is of you, that light, that light, that light, That light shines around you, surrounds you, is in you, is of you. 3. Daylight returns with a message written in warmth. I love you. And together, we close our eyes and travel light years to a calmer space.
What a joy to spend time with two insightful and inspiring artists. I hope you've been inspired to pick up your pen or get to your keyboard, because there's 2 art prompts to choose from. You can either write a poem based on colors like Huascar described, or a poem based on an object like Hadara described. More instructions about each art prompt can be found on our website at kcrep.org/ArtSpark. I'm so excited to read and hear your poems and hopefully share them on the next episode. Send them to me at artspark@kcrep.org, or you can post them to your social media using the hashtag ArtSparksArt. This has been so much fun. Until the next time, stay creative.
I love how you refer to them as the writer. You hear that? You're a writer.
You don't have to be an academic. You don't have to have gone to an MFA program. You could be a human speaking to other humans.
So many diverse voices in Kansas, and there's this mosaic of artistry occurring in our state, and I'm just glad that I can be a part of that and speak for poets directly.
Oh, I never thought about it that way. The conversation is complete when a third party can understand the back and forth between you as the artist and then the piece of art itself.